Be'ez Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Baba Kamma, daf Ayin Gimel. We're going to start from daf Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, approximately 8 lines from the top. Tanan, by the Mishnah. The Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Just to review, we had here a machlokes in the previous daf Ayin Beis and Beis. The machlokes between Abaya and Rava regarding an Eid Zomim. An Eid Zomim, as you know, an Eid that said testimony. The Torah gives a special right to another two Eidim to say, how could you say testimony on such and such a date? You were with us. And we believe the Eid Zomim. We believe the Eid Zomim. So let's say on January 15th, an Eid said testimony, and then Eid Zomim came a week later and said, how could you have said testimony about an event that you saw on January 15th? You were with us at that time. So there's a machlokes between Abaya and Rava. Abaya says, we believe the Eid Zomim, and now it turns out from January 15th, from the time they said their first testimony, they were Pasal Eidis. Rava says, no. Rava says, from the time the Eid Zomim says their testimony, only then does the aid become pasal. What's the difference? And obviously, it's a big difference. Any testimony that he said in between the time that he said his original aidis till the time that the Eid Zomim said he was a Zomim aidis, he was Eid Zomim, during that period of time, what is he? What is he? Is he a kosher aid or not kosher aid? So Abaye says from the very beginning, as soon as they said, oh, at that time, when you said aidis, you were a Zomim, you were Eid Zomim. Therefore, at that time, he becomes pasal. Rava says, no, from the time that they say testimony that he was an Eid Zomim, only then he becomes pasal. So it's a machlokes between Abaya and Rava. L'mafreya hu nifsal, that's Abaya's opinion. Rava says, mikan ulahaba hu nifsal. That is the machlokes. Now, we go into how it comes into our sugya. Usually, this sugya of Eid Zomim, if those who are familiar, is Masechta Malkus. But here, we're bringing it in because there's a question from our Mishnah. Now, we learned in our Mishnah, Gonav al Pishnaim, a man steals two Eidim, said, you stole an animal, you stole an ox, V'tavach u'moch al piyam. And these same two Eidim says, not only that, you shechted the animal. So, and then v'nimtzu u'zaymim. Then we find out the Eidim are zaymimim, mishalmin es hakoil, they pay everything. They wanted to make somebody into a ganaf that had to pay dalad v'hei. So if they found out these Eidim turned out to be zaymimim, they're going to have to pay the 4 and the 5, dalad and hay. So my love. So how can you make sense of our Mishnah? Sheidu, originally the Eidim, the pair of Eidim said Eidis on the Geneva. Okay, and one Sunday they said Eidis on the Geneva. V'chazrov heidu ala tvicha. And then on Wednesday they said testimony. Oh, he shechted the animal. V'huzmu ala Geneva. First they were muzam on the Geneva. V'chazrov v'huzmu ala tvicha. And then they were muzam on the shechting. So if they were muzam on the Geneva first, and then they were muzam on the tvicha, so the Mishnah says they would pay everything. Because at the end of the day, they were Muslim on the Tvicha as well. But the Isal Kedaitach, if you think that the halacha should be following Abaya Lemafreyehu Nifsal, that from the very start he becomes apostle Eidus, Hani, these pair of Eidim, Kivin the Tazmuluhu Ageneva, since they became already Muslim on the Geneva. So Igloil Milsel Mafreya. It turns out backwards. When they said Eidus on Wednesday, on the Tvicha Psulahaba, because they were already apostle already from Sunday, because it turns out they were Muslim already on the Sunday Eidus. So therefore, when they said on Wednesday that the guy shechted it, they were apostle Eidus. So their Eidus wouldn't have counted anyway. So the Mishnah doesn't make sense. Amai Mishal Tvicha. Once we find out they're Muslim on the Tvicha, why would they pay Dalet and Hey? They weren't a valid Eidus to begin with. Answers the Gemara, Amrei, Hachbamayaskin, and here we're talking about Kagoin, Shehuzmu al Tvicha Tchila. First, they were Muslim on the Shechting. and then they were Muslim on the Geneva. So when they were shachting, that's when they were kosher edis. And then afterwards, you mazda them on the Geneva. And therefore, it would make sense that they pay everything. Amre, so the yeshiva, the students asked back, that still doesn't make sense. Saif, at the end of the day, if even if they were Muslim on the Tvicha first, ki hadrim mitazme ageneva, well, once they were Muslim on the Geneva, okay, so the order is not going to matter. Igla milsa. Then it turns out they were already pasula edis already from the Geneva. So therefore, when they said edis on the tvicha, they were already certified as pasula edis, and therefore the edis didn't have any valid power to it to be mechayev the gan of anything. So amay mishalmi atvicha. Why would they pay on the tvicha? So why would they pay on the tvicha? It doesn't make sense. It turns out they were already pasul edis on Sunday. So if they, even though they were Muslim on the tvicha first, but if the end of the time they were Muslim on the Geneva, so they were pasul edis on they were pasul already from the time of the Geneva, right after the Geneva, they become pasul edis. So therefore, when they said edis on the tvicha, they were pasul edis, and therefore you can't require them. So why would they have to pay if they were also Muslim on the tvicha? Why would they have to pay dollar v'hei? They were pasala edis. Hilkasa. So the way to learn pshat in the Mishnah, and this is an odd way to say a terah to the Gemara, but what the Gemara says, it's firmly established that our Mishnah is talking about shehi'idu b'vas achlas v'huzmu. That the way you have to read our Mishnah is at one time. One shot, they said Eidis on the Geneva, and they also said Eidis on the Tvicha Mechira, and they said it in one sitting. So on Sunday, they said this man stole an animal and shechted it. Oh, so they didn't say it at two different times. So therefore, once they were Muslim, it goes all together, because now it's one Eidis, Teich Kedei Diba Kediba Damer. It's like it's in the same breath. So therefore, there's no order over here. As soon as they're Muslim, even if they were Muslim on the Geneva, they're still going to be required to pay for the tvicha or mechira that they wanted to hold this ganav liable, this alleged ganav liable. Okay, so the Gemara just now got through saying it's not a question against Abaya. Now the Gemara is saying, Lema katanoi, let us say the machlokes between Abaya and Rava is a machlokes tanoi. Now, again, Abaya says when an aid becomes a zoimim, you say he's an aid de zoimim, he's a apostle aid from the time that he said his first testimony. And Rava says no, from the time that they're saying imanu hayisim, from that time on, mekana laba, then they become apostle aidis. So that machlokes between Abaya and Rava could very well be the machlokes between Rabbi Yosi and the Tanakana in our Mishnah. Leima ketanoi, when you say it's machlokes tanoim, there were two people saying Adis that a man stole, and they're the same Adis that said that he shachted al and they were Muslim on the Geneva. So it turns out Adis shabatl miktsasa batla kula. So if they're Muslim on the Geneva, so then the Ganef doesn't have to pay kefil, and he doesn't have to pay dalet v'hei, because obviously if he's not a ganef, maybe he's shechting his own animal, because the testimony against him was muzam. But who's mu'alat tvicha? But let's say they only will mazim on the part of the edus that said that he shechted, but he still remains a ganef, because the part that they said that he stole an animal still holds true. So who misham tashlumi kefil, he will pay tashlumi kefil. The hain, the edim that wanted to say that he took it one step further on tvicha, they would pay mishalm and tashlumi shloisha, they would pay 3. Rabbi Yosi, so Rabbi Yosi said, Rabbi Yosi disagrees with the Tanakama. But medvar mamurim b'shtei edius. If there are two witnesses here, Ava be'edis achas, but if there's one edis, edis bat lakula. But one edis will say that they don't pay tashlumi shloisha. What's going on here? My b'shtei edus, my be'edus achas. What did Rabbi Yosi? Rabbi Yosi spoke in cryptic words over here, and we need to figure out what is he trying to say. Ilema, would you say? Rabbi Yosi was saying b'shtei edus means two witnesses. B'shtei edus mamish. B'shtei kitos. There are two sets of witnesses. One said Geneva, and one said he shechted it. And what does be'edis achas mean? When Rabbi Yosi says, but when it's edis achas, then it's edis shabbat l'mtzas shabbat l'kula. That means bekat achas. There's only one set of edim, but b'zeh chazeh. They said it in two different testimonies. First, they said geneva. A few days later, the same pair of edim said that he shechted. Would Rabbi Yossi now make sense? Be'edis achas, bekat achas, b'zeh chazeh, with one edis. It's one group. It's just on Sunday they said that he stole, and then on Tuesday they came back. The same pair of edis said, "Oh, by the way, he shechted." If they said edis on the geneva and then he says edis on the tvicha, just because he had muzam on the tvicha, would you say now the ganaf is not a ganaf anymore? Edlis shabatla mitzasa batlakula. Oh, the ganaf is not a ganaf anymore. What does he mean? Mitazmalu geneva, and then you say he's muzam on the geneva. How would you? Where would you go? Where would you come to say such a thing? They were muzam on the tvicha, but their edus on the geneva still holds true. So the ganaf would still be a ganaf. He would have to pay kefil, and you don't say edus shabat l'miktsasa bat l'kula, and there's no geneva over here. So how do you make sense of Rabbi Yossi? And you see where the Gemara is going to go over here, but what the Gemara is going to say is that the way we're going to learn Pshat in Rabbi Yossi will now make it that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbanan are arguing the same way Abai and Rava. Elulav. What is b'shtei edis? What does Rabbi Yossi mean, two edis? Be'edis achas, still one edis. Kein shtei edis, that look like two edis. Umayninu, how's one set of edim look like two edis? Kat achas, you have two people, same two people, b'zeh chazeh, came one day after another. First, they said edis on the geneva. 2 days later, they said edis on the tvicha. Avol be'edis achas b'vas achas. But if it's one edis at one time, that means they said their edis that the man stole, and they also said edis that he shechted, and they said it at the same time. Then, if they were muzim on everything, then the whole thing falls apart, and they would have they would be shalman as a koil, and the ganav is not a ganav. V'savru, everybody holds the kuli alma toich gedei dibba kedibba dibba. Every time it holds that when you say an edis at the same time, it's considered as one item. Anything within the same sentence is like all one thing. Toich gedei dibba, if it's within the same sentence, or even if there's a slight break, it's considered as one statement. So my love, so what would be the machlekes? The Rabbanim savri mekan al abahun nifsal. If they say edus at one time, what would the Rabbanim hold? That only the tvicha mechira falls apart. If they were muzam on the tvicha mechira and not on the geneva, then the whole thing doesn't fall apart. So the geneva still holds up. The kibin the miyushate komazazi. Since they're only be mazin them on the shchita, and therefore on the tvicha they're muslim, on the geneva they're not muslim, even though their testimony was said at the same time. But Rabbi Yossi holds l'mafreyahu nifsal. Right now you go backwards and say in the back he was nifsal. So the kivan, since the biyad kias hidi hudim pasli, since even if you mazan them only on the tvicha, but it's connected automatically with the geneva, and you go back to the time before the geneva, they were pasala edis. Once they're muzam on the tvicha, it tazmin lahu al geneva. They're also going to be muzam on the geneva. So the Tarkidei Dibber is Kedibber Dami. So again, you have Rabbi Yossi holding like Abaya, and the Rabbanim will be holding Kanal Abba, hold like Rava. Answers the Gemara, Amre, not so fast. If everybody holds Tarkidei Dibber is Kedibber Dami, the Kuli Alma, everybody would agree, like Abaya said, Lemafreya Hunifsal. And Eid Zaymin becomes possible from the very time backwards, he becomes possible. Ella over here is a little bit different. The question is, do you actually say that two statements that are said at one time is considered like one statement? Rabbanan Sabre, Rabbanan hold, go to Amid Beis. Lav Kedibba Dami. It's not like one statement. The Rabbi Yossi Sava, Rabbi Yossi says, Taish Kedei Dibba is Kedibba Dami. Taish Kedei Dibba is Kedibba Dami. So the Rabbanan hold it's Lav Kedibba Dami. It's not like one statement. It still can be broken apart. Therefore, it's like two edis. And therefore, just because they were muzam on the tvicha, the geneva will hold steady. Okay? So therefore, only on the tvicha they're muzam, not on the geneva. But Rabbi Yossi holds that it's kedibadami. It's like one edis, and therefore they're possible at that hour, at that moment, and therefore the whole edis falls apart. Now the Gemara just questions. So Rabbi Yossi, in order to make sense of this, has to hold toich kedei diba kedibadami. So the Gemara asks a question. So Rabbi Yossi, does Rabbi Yossi really hold toich kedei diba kedibadami, that saying something in one sentence is like one statement? But now we learned in the Mishnah, somebody says that I want this to be, let's say, an oila and a shlamim, okay? Whatever it is. He wants this one animal to be two things. So Rezu Tmurus Oila. Divrei Meir. Meir holds you take his first statement, it's an oila, and that's it. These are the words of Meir. Rabbi Yossi says, you ask him, if he wants it to be both, if that's what he intention wanted, that this animal should be an oila and a shlamim. Since you can't make one animal an oila and a shlamim, devar of kayamim, that means everything makes sense, and therefore we'll keep it. And therefore, what are you going to do? How could an animal be an oila and shlamim? You put it out to pasture, wait till it gets a mum, a blemish, then you sell it, and then half the money you'll bring as an oila, and half the money you'll bring as a shlamim. But if he said Tmuras Oila B'Nimlach V'Amar Tmuras Shlamim, if he first said an Oila, this is what Rabbi Yossi is saying, and then he changed his mind and said a Shlamim, Hareze Tmuras Oila, because you can't change your mind. Nimlach, if you're changing your mind, Pshita, of course you can't change your mind. You called it an Oila. Now how are you turning it into a Shlamim? Papa said Nimlach B'Soich Dibba Kamrina. He changed his mind in Taich Kedei Dibba, very close, without any complete interruption between the time that he said oila to the time that he said shlamim. And nevertheless, Rabbi Yossi says that he can't change your mind, even if it's toich kedei dibar. So we see from here that Rabbi Yossi does not hold toich kedei dibar kedibah dami. And here on the top of the page, he's saying in order to make sense of that brisa, you have to say Rabbi Yossi holds toich kedei dibar is kedibah dami. So what is it? Amri, so the Gemara answers a statement. There are two types of toich kedei diba. Chad, one type of toich kedei diba is kedei she'ilas Talmud l'Rav. That is the amount it takes the time for a Talmud to ask a question from a Rebbe. The Chad kedei she'ilas a Rav l'Talmud, and one is the opposite, where the Rav, when the Rav is one is the Talmud asking the Rav, and one is the Rav asking the Talmud. Ki lesle Rabbi Yossi kidei she'elis. When does Rabbi Yossi not hold toich kidei diba kedibah dami? If it's too long of an interruption, kidei she'elis Talmud Rav Shalom Alecha Rabbi Meiri. When he said Shalom Alecha Rabbi Meiri, that's too much. Enough. It's too much statement to be considered toich kidei diba, and that's what it's talking about over here. When he said Tmuras Oila, he waited Shalom Alecha Rabbi Meiri, and then he said Tmuras Shlamim. So because of that, therefore, it's too much of a hefsek. Rabbi Yossi said it's only an oila, not a shlamim. But in our mission, in the previous brisa, where Rabbi Yossi said the way we interpret it, that he holds toich kedei diba is kedibah dami is kedei she'ilas a Rav l'Talmud. When a Rav asks a Talmud, "How you doing?" he only says Shalom Alecha. How are you? So islay that even Rabbi Yossi would agree toich kedei diba is kedibah dami. Okay, new Gemara. Amar, back with the Eidim Zaymim. Amar Rava said, Eidim shehuk chashu. You have two Eidim that said, let's say, two Eidim said you killed somebody. Then two Eidim said you killed somebody. And then Bezdin Paskim, the guy is going to die. I mean, the murderer should die. Then another two Eidim came after the case was closed and said they denied it. He didn't kill anybody. And Usaif Huzmu. And then there was a third set of Eidim that said about the first Eidim, they were Muslim. So Neharagin, they get killed. You don't say that. What would I say otherwise? I would say that the first set of Eidim still hold strong because they withstood a Sakdin. You would still, in other words, they still hold strong. You would say that since they were weakened and they were knocked out because there was another two Eidim that said you didn't kill, I would think that if they are found subsequently to be Zaymimim, they would not be killed because already they were weakened by somebody who denied what they were saying. There were another two Eidim that denied what they were saying. So again, you have two Eidim say Harak, and then two other Eidim said you didn't kill. And a third pair of Adim came about the first pair of Adim and said, Imanu Hayisib. They would still get in the Harogim. You wouldn't say, oh, they're not good Adim anymore, and so therefore, what do you mean Mazim? No, they were still good Adim because the Hakosha, the denying the second pair of Adim, is connected Tchilas Hazomahi. It's part of weakening the first pair of Adim, but it wasn't complete. And therefore, when the third pair of Adim say more than what the second pair of second pair of say he didn't kill, and the third pair of Adim said about the first pair of Adim, you were with us, and therefore they're Muslim, and because of that, they would be killed, the first pair of Adim. Omar Rava said, he has an interesting raya. Where do I know my statement? The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Idiani bi'ish ploini shesima es ein avdoi v'pilashinai. Adam said about somebody that he blinded his slave, and therefore he goes free. And then afterwards, he knocked out his tooth. And once you knock out a tooth of a free man, so the Rav, the master, now has to pay for the tooth. And then he says, the Brisa says, Harav oimekein. The Rav likes this. The nimtzu zaymimim, and they were found that the zaymimim, mishalman demei ayin eved. So these people who said, Madana bi'ish plaini, shishimazene, plays the eye to the Eved. So this whole brisa makes totally no sense, and the Gemara takes it apart. If you read the brisa the way it's simply written, the lake katashraina, there's no other case, there's only one set, and then they will mazim them. Mishalman demei ayin le'eved, they pay the eye to the Eved, they should pay it to the owner. After they were trying to get him to go free, they should pay for his eye. They were trying to get the master to let the Eved go free. The main thing is they should pay the master the entire Eved that they wanted him to free because he blinded him. And they turned out they were Muslim. Because the Rav says this. Does the Rav like this idea? I mean, what does he care about this? I mean, he's losing his Eved. So this whole brisa makes no sense. Elulav, let's read it this way. Going to Osi Beitrei, two people come. Vamrin they say, the master knocked his tooth out and blinded his eye. Okay, so now when he knocked his tooth out, the Eved should go free, and now the master has to pay for the eye because he blinded his Eved's eye. He has to pay it for his free Eved. The boy of Mesef Rav, the May Einai. Now the Rav has to give the value of the eye to the Eved. That's the first set of Adam. Also, then the second pair of Adam came. The Amr said, no, the story was wrong. Einai, first he knocked out the eye, and then the master knocked out the teeth. So they wanted to make the master only pay the value of the shtit, the first pair of Adam disagreed totally with the story than the second pair of Adam. But which would the master like? He would rather pay the value of a tooth than the value of an eye. So v'hainu sharav oimekim. That's what the brisa means, that the Rav agrees, probably likes the second pair of Adam. The nichale b'maytaka amre. So the second pair of Adam are really hakosha because there's somebody that totally contradicts what they're saying. The first pair of Adam. Now the ketani, and then it says nimtzu zoymim mitzioi. The second pair of Adam turned out to be zoymim. Oh. So mishalmim, they pay the me'ayin le'eved, they pay the eye to the eved because they were trying to get the eved to only get the payment of the tooth and not the eye. But despite the fact you could be mazim the middle pair of Adam. Shma mina hakosha, a denial, a tchilas hazomi is the beginning of a hazama, and therefore once a pair of Adam is found to be contradicted by another pair of Adam, still they could be subject to the laws of Hazama. Okay, we're going to continue this, Bez Hashem, tomorrow. So ends Daf Ayin Gimel.